Tony and Ziva's future is fundamentally altered by the stunning death at the end of NCIS, Tony and Ziva Episode 5, which locks in one depressing reality about the main character's new life. The attack on Tony's business, which made it reasonable to not fully focus on their family life, supported the idea of Tony and Ziva, which began years after their reunion. Tony, Ziva, and Tali's family life in Paris appeared to return to normal, despite their obvious communication issues, which were exemplified by Ziva's ignorance about the depth of Tony's new relationship. However, the shock death that made Tony and Ziva's predicament unquestionably decisive cannot be ignored, even if the pandemonium that dominated the NCIS spin-off could. After being wrongfully accused of several crimes, Tony and Ziva had to deal with the investigation and its pandemonium, but Tony was particularly affected by the emotional roller coaster because he was certain that Henry had deceived him. In a blink-and-you-miss-it discussion in Tony and Ziva Episode 4, Henry was implied to not be the antagonist, but Tony was not around to see it. Given his and Ziva's experience, Tony's concerns that his, Ziva's, and Tali's existence in Paris was merely a lovely fiction destined to be ruined were solidified when they became imprisoned in the Supermax jail in Tony and Ziva Episode 5. But they managed to escape that chaos by trusting Henry and persuading him of the truth, giving Tony some hope. Together with Henry, Tony lost what little hope he had to resume their regular life with Tali. Everything that had transpired up until that point might have been resolved at the end of the probe. But since it couldn't be undone, the loss of Tony's best friend in Tony and Ziva was far as significant than Henry's alleged betrayal. Even worse is the fact that Henry's connection with Tony ultimately brought him down, despite the fact that his association with Interpol pushed him to act morally. Markham had the opportunity to kill Henry at any time, but he chose to do so while Henry was preoccupied with assisting Tony and Ziva in their escape in order to save Tali, which made Tony feel somewhat guilty. Before witnessing his best buddy being shot and killed, Tony dreamed of living the same happy life in Paris once he and Ziva had identified the true criminals and cleared their reputations. But it should not have been his ultimate objective. After what had transpired, his conversation with Ziva even alluded to Tony's need to consult a specialist. In contrast to Ziva, whose exaggerated feelings upon reuniting with Tali and Tony persuaded her to attempt therapy, Tony's existence in Paris resulted from his attempt to establish a new normal without necessarily putting in the necessary effort. Episode 5 of Tony and Ziva demonstrated Tony's readiness to go to the couple's boot camp for Ziva, but he did not take part as though he had made the decision. Tony may finally do the work and start to analyze everything that occurred to him, Ziva, and Tali after witnessing his closest friend shot dead and trying to return to his previous life in Paris. Losing his best buddy can serve as a wake-up call, even though their past should have been sufficient justification. Its titular characters and their connection with Tali can therefore benefit from attempting to establish a new normal following the events of Tony and Ziva. The relationship between Tony and Ziva in NCIS, Tony and Ziva may be revived as a result, but more significantly, Tony will finally be emotionally well after everything he has been through. Thanks for watching. For more updates stay tuned and don't forget to like, share and subscribe to my channel, please.